Friends, hello. Welcome to this episode of Making It Up. This is my podcast where I sit down with other writers and we just talk. One of the reasons I started Making It Up was because I like talking to people. I love talking to writers. And I was very, how do I put this delicately? I was very tired of being interviewed myself by people who weren't really good at it or didn't have any interesting questions. That sounds fucking terrible. That's very few, but I feel like I hadn't been on podcast myself as a guest where it was just a conversation between two writers and one of the great things is my guest today at the end, she said this felt like just sitting in a coffee shop with a writer friend talking. I'm like, dude, that is exactly what I was trying to achieve. So if that's the kind of conversation you're interested in, you are in the right place. And before I get to today's guest, I just want to shout out our Unbound Writer Paris conference. So I am, I feel like I say this on every episode. We're very close to launching stuff, and I think this will all be launched by the time this episode airs. So head on over to unboundwriter.com and you can navigate to the link to see our Parisian writing retreat, mystery thriller suspense writing retreat with myself, Alex Finlay, and Clemence Michelin, and with a guest appearance, a guest instructor, Riley Sager, as well as Abby Dunn, who runs Crime by the Book. Man, this is going to be a retreat for the ages, 4 1/2 days in the heart of Paris, with best-selling mystery, thriller, and suspense writers. It's going to be immersive. We're going to keep it to a small group of people, probably no more than 20. So registration should be open by now. I've been working very hard on the website, which looks fucking great, I should say. I've worked really hard on it. So anyway, if that's of interest to you, check it out now. And there's also, we're having early bird rates until I think September or something like that. So if you want to get in early, you can. Right now, we're doing the early bird rates. So today on the guest, I have the amazing Ellery Adams. So Ellery Adams, she has written something. I think she said she's working on her 47th book right now. Very prolific mystery writer. Um, Known for not only kind of traditional mysteries but also cozy mysteries. And what's fascinating about her, aside from how strong her body of work is that she decided to kind of branch out a little bit from the lanes that she was in and write something that we went into a deep conversation about this, what to call it. Kind of classified almost as like cozy horror. So definitely darker than what she's written before. Her new book just came out. It's called Invasive Species. Um, and takes place in the 1980s. You definitely have to go to her website and read the description because it's amazing. Um, and just we spent a lot of time talking about genres, definitions of the genres, publishers and agents' reactions to doing something outside of what you're known for, the pros and cons of it, the pros and cons of writing in the 80s, which we went into quite a bit. So it was really fascinating. And hearing about kind of what she wants to do going forward, kind of in this space, as well as writing in maybe the space she's more historically known for. So it was good. Lots of good insights, lots of good tips on craft as well. And at the end, we make up a great story. And she was fantastic. You could just see all the thoughts coming to her mind as she was speaking. So it was a really good story at the end of this one. This is a fantastic episode. This is my conversation with Ellery Adams. So you were pitched to be by Megan, well, Stephanie, who I've come to love.
She's
Steph,
great.
Stephanie is great. How long have you? At what point in your career did you say, an outside PR firm is really helpful? Because I've done the same thing with every one of my releases.
Well, I've kind of like got the gist of, pimping my own mysteries by now because I've written so many of them.
Right.
And but this was a totally new genre, and I thought, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be like, stay in your lane, you shouldn't be writing this. This is not your normal genre. And, they did definitely come out and leave me nasty reviews on Goodreads, but that's just people these days. So I thought I'm gonna need to try to reach some new audience and preferably in some ways a younger audience
Yeah.
than maybe I've had before. And I thought, well, I don't know how to do that. I'm
Right.
not on
Right.
TikTok. I'm
Right.
terrified of TikTok, honestly.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the place where authors go to get canceled if they say the wrong thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
So this
I
is your
had
first
actually
time
met
with an
Megan.
outside PR firm.
What's up?
This is your first time then with kind of
Yes,
hiring your own outside
yes.
PR firm.
And
Yeah.
I met Megan at a Tucson Book Festival where she was there to support one of her other authors. And I loved her energy so much right
Yeah.
from the
Yeah. She's
beginning and
great.
her vibe. And I never knew I was going to work with her back then, but I just thought, man, I really like her. So,
Yeah, totally. And the thing of it is, because I've been with a few different ones. I've been with K Publicity for about 8 books now. They're also in charge of figuring out what's shifting every year and who to talk to and what things have the greatest efficacy, which is for you and me, it's too
yeah,
much
we
to
can't
keep
figure that out. We
on top of.
try.
So, well, I'm curious to talk about, you mentioned lanes, and it's a fascinating subject because, and please just correct me where I'm wrong or add some more flavor in here, but you have what, like 40 kind of traditional cozy-ish mysteries. So you have carved out a very deep lane, right? With all of that volume. So
Right.
and looking at your current book, Invasive Species, which just came out last month. um sure, I would, looking at the description, I would say maybe it's a little bit of a different lane. I wouldn't say it's a massive departure. You're writing under your own name.
Right.
When you kind of had this idea, what was that conversation with your editor like?
Well, my editor was like, "What do you think about keeping your name or changing your name?" And I said, I've been building up the brand for 20 years, and I have faith that many of my mystery readers, will be tough enough to move over and read this because there still is it's kind of like a story with teeth, but it's also a story with heart. So I figured if they're reading my books because they like the characterization and they like the heart, they can handle some cursing, they can handle some blood, they can handle some sex.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Some of them were immediately like, I don't read these kinds of books, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their taste. But I just had a lot of faith in my current readers that they would be able to take it. I think the hard thing is when you tell somebody who reads a lot of traditional mysteries that you wrote something with horror elements, they hear the word horror
Right.
and they think splatter,
Right.
right?
Right.
Splatterfest. It's going to be Dexter with Rorschach
Right.
pictures
Yeah,
done in
totally.
blood all over the
Right.
wall. And I mean, horror is just like mystery. There's just genres within genres. And,
Right.
what I was trying to convey was this idea is like, this book is kind of a good gateway book for
Right.
people to try horror because it's not like that. And it's more dread than actual scares.
Right.
It's
Which
not
is
going to
what
give
I would
anybody
say a
nightmares.
thriller is.
Right.
you know
Exactly.
so I mean, I write very dark thriller fiction, and I would probably contend that most readers think that there's more violence in my books than there actually is, because that sense of dread and that sense of anything bad can happen anytime is important to my writing.
Right.
um yeah, and it's also been labeled horror adjacent, and horror is probably, to me, the most fluid and ill-defined genre that's out there, because horror can just be in your own head. It could be violence free, really, and it could just be I always felt horror kind of had elements of hopelessness to it, um, more so than maybe darker thrillers. But I noticed on with your book, kind of the term cozy horror. I'm like,
Right, which was something
that's
I'd never heard of
well, I
before.
hadn't either, but I'm like, that's great because to your point, horror immediately has connotations to kind of the average reader, I would say. So you like that it kind of
I
softens it
do
a little
because
bit.
I really grew up with like creature feature movies.
Right,
And
right,
those were like I loved them because
right,
they had monsters in them, but I never felt unsafe.
right.
To the and again, that was like my gateway to horror. Now, of course, I'll read any genre of horror. I think horror is a fascinating genre because really it's just exploring the monstrosity of humanity,
Right.
usually in the way that thrillers and mysteries also do. I think that these are like kissing cousins. You know what I mean?
Totally. Totally.
Um,
And
so
horror is
yeah, I
also
mean, like
very popular. So your ability to reach new readers, even at the expense of losing some, is probably a great gamble because
yeah.
horror also is very, that word alone, as much as it can be a turnoff, is way more of a turn on for a huge generation of readers.
Right. And for them, I'm not her for some of them, I'm not horrific enough.
Oh, of course.
So
Of course.
it's interesting to kind
Yeah,
of like find your people out there. And I do love that. I feel like horror is really having a moment right now,
it
which is
is.
great.
Yeah.
I think that having an actor win an Academy Award from a horror movie is huge,
Right.
huge.
Well, think back
That
even to the 90s when Silence of the Lambs won Best Picture. I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's
it's been a
incredible.
long time really since a horror film was recognized like that. But I mean, it just goes to show that there's so much depth in just about any genre. And I think that we as readers make assumptions about genres and we can really be wrong until we actually like pick up the book. And there's just so much crossover. I think that anytime someone's being killed, it is really just we're looking at darkness in the psyche, darkness of society, and that happens in so many different genres,
Right.
and that's the stuff I'm attracted to. I'm attracted to dark thrillers, dark mysteries, dark horror, dark Greek retellings. I love it all.
Totally. And that's what's so fascinating and ironic about maybe the traditional cozy mystery is that it's fairly light, fairly heavy into kind of amateur investigation. And but underneath all of it, somebody died. This really serious, heavy, if it happened to any of us, it would be the most major thing. And I think those readers are just like, that's just accepted. But then when you get into like, yeah, well, let's explore the actuality of that, then they're like, oh, no, 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 that's too much. But we're still talking about murder.
Right, right. And I think in the beginning when I first started writing, I was definitely writing cozy mysteries. This is the tenets of a cozy mystery, and that we got to
Right.
stick to these. And then the more that I wrote, the more that I wanted to incorporate grittier topics. I wanted the motives for murder to be really things that were reflected in society. And I wanted the murders to have an impact on a community as they do. That was not light, that showed that
Yeah.
people were really broken by
Right.
them and that as a community, yeah, you can try to heal from it, but you can't really ever repair the damage. And that's kind of dark for cozies. And so a lot of mystery readers would be like, well, we love Ellery Adams, but she's not a cozy writer anymore. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think my current series is just, traditional. And I don't compare myself to Agatha Christie because she's a plot-driven
A
writer and
very,
I'm a
yeah, very intricate
character-driven
detail.
writer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, and my thing is that I don't like when violence is trivialized in any genre.
Totally. Oh, you're speaking to
Like,
the choir. Yeah.
yeah, I that bothers me. And that's to me as a reader is a total turnoff because I'm just like, someone's dead, like the little jokes or the puns or the whatever, it doesn't work for me. I can't buy into that
Right.
atmosphere.
Right.
Like there has to be and it's not even a ripple effect. It's a freaking tsunami when there's a violent death. So
Right.
let the storm come. I want to see it. I want to feel it.
Yeah, I 100% have that same attitude. And I've preached a lot about this, sex and violence being treated with such respect and with such consequence, that or even any violence. Like I turn off the TV if I'm watching a show and somebody gets shot in the leg and they keep running,
Right.
like
I hate, especially when they're shot in the knee.
right,
I'm like, your leg would not function.
right, it drives
You
me
would be
nuts.
dragging your ass across the floor. You are not running.
And
Yeah.
I think the beauty of it is then, like to your point earlier, you can have this sense of dread without violence, and then the violence comes, and then you just go for it. You're just like, this is what really happens. And that's my sweet spot. I think the trouble we get into as writers, and you kind of mentioned this too about this town having this neighborhood having these consequences. Um, some people read us to escape, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, this feels a little bit too real, which is exactly the point that you're trying to write, because that's important to us as writers, and is trying to find that spot between what's escapist enough and what's still scary, like this could happen to you. And it's hard for me, it's hard to hit that balance. I need
Right.
feedback to know
Right.
if
And
I've hit
I
it or
think
not.
that escapism, I definitely want to deliver that because I do see so much value to escapism.
Right.
It's really good for our brains to just disappear for a while in a story. But I never want to like let readers off so easy where there's no emotional commitment to what I'm doing. So like
Right.
if I'm writing and I don't feel emotional about it, then I'm failing. So like I get so caught up in it that if one of my characters is really like devastated, and I'm not an overly emotional person, I'm pretty even keeled. So like if I'm crying while I'm writing it, I'm like this is what should be happening right now. Like
Right.
this is what
Right.
I want them to feel.
I know it's so difficult. And I remember when I started out writing, having zero idea what I was doing, I was so fixated on that point of making things as real as possible that I wasn't selling, my books weren't selling because my heroes were too weak, is what I heard a lot. Because I would think like, you know, what would happen to this person? And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, they would get their ass kicked. This is what would, so you have to start thinking, well, what would I do? And then you got to add like 30 to 40% more bravery and stupidity into that to make it a little bit more like anything can happen. And that just takes hundreds of thousands of words to just try to tap into
it
that
does. It
vibe.
does.
And it's so hard to see it for ourselves in the middle of a book, right? Um,
Yeah, especially the middle. I've tried to explain the muddy middle to people that that is a place where we often drown for
I
weeks.
I
It's the
know.
worst place.
Yeah, well, that self-doubt that never quite goes away, and you're able to compartmentalize it the more you write. But yeah, it comes out in the middle because you've written just enough to feel proud of what you have, but then not enough to be like, is this going anywhere? Is
Right.
there
Is
a
this any
story
good?
here?
Is this any good? That's what I always ask. Like, is this too boring? Is this any good? Is the pacing too slow? And I mean, I think I'm working on book number 47 right now, and it's still the same thing every process. It's
That's amazing.
still, I don't know, maybe all writers we just have terrible self-esteem. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. What I've evidenced from interviewing a lot of writers is there's that mixture of low self-esteem, but also that weird confidence slash tenacity to get them writing in the first place. Because most people think I could never do this. And somebody with low self-esteem would certainly think that. But somehow we
Right,
all say, like, yeah, I could probably figure this out, which is it's a really weird combination. And you need both of them, I think, to
right.
to
And I
succeed.
definitely think that you need humility to write good characters, but then you also need arrogance to write good characters. Isn't that weird?
Totally,
Right.
totally. I know. And I'm on my probably writing my 14th or 15th book, and the same thing. Like I never feel, just this morning, I'm like literally 1,000 words into something new and I don't outline. So I don't know where it's going, but
Yeah, I
I
don't
kind of,
outline either.
I kind of
Maybe
like the
that's
idea of it,
part
but
of
I'm
why
like,
we get stuck is we're like, oh, well, now we've written out our idea and we're stuck. So,
I know, but that's also, I think the beauty of it a little bit is knowing that I think the one thing confidence gives you over time writing is you've written enough books that you get to that middle, you can acknowledge the feelings of despair and know that you've been there before, and also have the confidence to say, I'll figure it out because I trust my imagination. Um, where I get stuck is, well, I know I'll figure it out. Well, I figure it out in a way that is going to satisfy readers as much as, say, my last book or whatever.
right, right.
And that's just a roll. That's
And the truth is, some books are better than others, honestly. I mean,
totally
we can't, all of our books can't be the best book. You know, some
no,
come out and they're good.
right.
Some come out and they're like shining and awesome. And then the next one might be okay. I mean, you just can't write the best book every time. It just doesn't work that way.
No, and I would contend that readers aren't looking for you to write their best book. If you've developed a fan base, I think they're looking for you to write something that's you. And I think that's where we get stuck a little bit too, because I know I always sit down and be like, what could be like an amazing book, as opposed to what is expected from me? What am I good at? And how can I recreate that with a fresh story, but still have the elements there? So it might not stand out as being like this, you know, award-winning piece of literature, but a good Carter Wilson book.
Right.
And I think we battle that a little bit, right? We're always trying to like in our mind, like, this is a book they could be talking about for centuries.
I don't think I've ever said that to myself. I'm more like I'm visualizing scenes from like The Princess Bride, and I'm like, here comes the pit of despair.
Right.
Let's try to avoid
Well, now if we
that.
could write a book like that, then we'd be really.
Yeah, right.
And so when you said like the idea for invasive species, it's a little hard to say, isn't it?
Right.
Was this your idea, or did it come from the publisher saying, do you feel like trying something different?
Oh no, I mean this it had been and festering is really the word. It had been festering in me for a while. I really wanted to try to go down a different road, you know, totally different genre. I didn't know what genre I wanted to write. I just knew it's this is crazy thing to say, but the book is very autobiographical. This is basically my childhood. I
Hmm.
did live next to a Mrs. Smith who never came outside. She did have a really creepy garden where we worked and uncovered very strange things like a boarded up well and gravestones with the
Oh,
names
wow.
scratched out.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. How
So
was that
we
not your
were
first
really
novel?
scared of her. Yeah. I mean, she was legit.
Yeah.
You know, and I made up stories about her when I was a kid because I was a storyteller and this is what you do.
Right.
And you know, I was basically like lying about her on this on the bus, you know, just for street cred. Like, oh yeah, you know, I saw Mrs. Smith in the window, but I didn't really see her, and she did this, and I was absolutely full of it. But I loved that sense, like all the heads on a school bus were swiveling, and I had this captive audience, you know, and
Right.
I was like, this feels good.
Right.
Like I knew I wanted to do that for the rest of my life, just like
Right.
spin these yarns, which were just at the time lies, but
Right. Right.
right,
That's what
developed
yarns
into
are.
stories later. But she never really went away in my head, and I thought, well, I'd love to kind of talk about her, and I would love to kind of talk about how the female friendships on the street where I grew up absolutely just fell apart in the 80s because women started really judging each other for what kind of moms they were and if they were working or not working. And um, of all the families that I grew up with, there was 100% divorce rate on my street.
Oh my goodness.
So there was a lot of conflict, you know,
So where was
and I
this? Where
didn't,
did you grow up?
Long Island.
Long Island. Where in Long
Yeah.
Island?
What's up?
Where in Long Island?
Oh, it's a little town called Centerport. It's
Okay,
North
my
Shore,
partner grew up in Northport, East Northport.
but she'll know this book. That's the harbor.
All right. Okay.
Like,
All right. I
that's
gotta make sure she
crazy.
reads this.
Yeah. So if she happened to have been on like the swim team, we would have been on the competing swim teams.
But it's not actually called Cold Harbor, or it is?
No, Cold Harbor, I just fictionalized the name. It's actually Centerport, which is the town across
Yeah.
the harbor from Northport.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So I saw Jaws for the first time at Northport Movie Theater when we were supposed to be watching The Fox and the Hound. We snuck into Jaws. And that was just
That's
like,
great. That's great.
that is so crazy. What a small world.
But you were just saying all these friendships broke up in the 1980s, which I
Yeah.
kind
And, as a kid, I didn't really pay attention to this stuff because I only cared about myself and my friends.
of. Hmm.
But as I got older and I was kind of talking to my mom about what life was like, and I always thought she was like kind of mean and kind of harsh and kind of stressed and kind of tired. And now I understand why, because she was dealing with three kids and dogs and cats and a house and a job. And it was too much.
Yeah.
And women were literally like unraveling.
Yeah.
And, she told me, she was like, I was angry. I was angry, and there was nobody to turn to with my anger, right?
Interesting.
Because
Yeah.
we were all feeling this way. And like, we weren't getting paid the same amount as guys. And, your father would work during the week, and then on the weekends he got to play. I never got to play. There was
Right.
no
It
play,
was still
right?
very 1950s-ish in a way, traditional household family, except for the divorce rate.
Right, right. And the fact that inflation was so high that
Right.
many women who wanted to stay home couldn't because they couldn't afford gas and heat and blah, blah, blah. So they had
Yeah.
to go to work.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize how much conflict was going on then. And when I thought back about her and her friend group and the different places they all ended up, I was like, they were all really angry. And I was like, I want to take that anger and then that strange thing about Mrs. Smith, and I want to write a book about it. And I'm going to throw in this Icelandic housekeeper because we did have a woman who would come watch us when my parents are out of town, and she was from Iceland.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
She was awesome.
And the night, so I wrote one book in the 80s. It was my COVID book. And, so I said in 1987, I was 17 at the time. And I'm obsessed with the 80s. Just because it was my coming of age.
Yeah, I love the 80s.
Yeah. But yeah, to your plot here, you start to research the 80s and because you can't just rely on your own memory, and you realize
No, heck no. Yeah.
like it was a pretty shitty decade. Like there was some very unpleasant things happening in the 80s, which makes for great writing.
Right.
But
And like you probably don't remember, the unpleasantness
no,
or
because
the
you're
obsession with
17.
materialism and that stuff because we were
Yeah,
kids.
you remember going to the mall with your friends.
Exactly. You remember your yellow sports Walkman and like,
Right. And your swatches and
oh heck yeah,
right.
but when you look
Totally.
back at it from this standpoint, now you're just like, we were killing the environment,
It was
Aquanet and Dracar
materialistic,
Noir alone
cocaine.
were killing the environment. We were
Right.
capitalistic, self-centered,
Right.
all this stuff.
Literally
Terrible.
the threat of nuclear war.
Yes, yes. We were polluting the oceans, like just dumping all kinds of crap into them with no care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's for writing what you've written, it's great. And especially if you know your audience is of comparable age and they can appreciate it. Well,
And
I know
that's the sticky part
it is the
because
sticky part because
I
you
have
like,
learned that when you set something in the 80s and you have a reader who has no idea what the 80s were like, you might miss the mark with them.
yeah, which is frustrating, right? Because you look at the success of something like Stranger Things, and you
Right.
think about what we watched, or what we're capable. Like I can watch something that's set in the 50s, and I feel like I have a pretty good appreciation for it, even though I didn't exist then. But yet they don't afford that kind of intelligence to modern day, entertainment consumers, which is, I think, a little nonsensical. Everybody, kind of can know, but yes, I've been warned the same thing, especially, I had a co-written YA book set in the 80s and, we're still trying to sell it. And they're like, oh, yeah, but people who are in their 20s today who might read this, I'm like, well, they don't know that the 80s existed. They have zero contact for it.
Right,
But
right. And
that's what
I
we get
think that
told.
the thing to do there is, which I'm not sure if I completely succeeded at, is to just have characters where they can identify with something else. But I think because I had so many like women with kids who were going through this shift. A lot of Gen Zs who don't know anything about the 80s other than like a couple of, very well-known things, but don't know about like the societal shift for women. They couldn't get invested in it because they weren't interested in the characters. They're too young to know what
Hmm.
challenges these women were going through. And the monster itself wasn't enough to keep them
Hmm.
totally invested. And then the 12-year-old in it wasn't somebody they could relate to because she was 12 in 1982. And,
Right.
so I did not do a good enough job finding a character for them having no anchoring in the 80s and having no anchoring with women who are going through all of this societal pressure to identify with for some
Yeah,
of
I
them.
mean that's a blanket statement. I'm sure you did do it for a lot of readers, and it's always a little bit of a crapshoot for sure.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is that there's some profound, cool things to do in the pre-heavy technology era. I love it because especially as it lends to thrillers and horror, it just amps up the tension. Um,
Yes,
I,
I
I, ca-
love not
I
having
can't research
technology.
Mrs. Smith. I don't, if I go over there, I don't have a phone and a camera and stuff if I want to meet a friend, we just have to agree to meet at this place at this time and hope we show up. Like that lends itself greatly to just propulsive
Right.
suspense.
And speaking to your point, that also puts you outside more, and outside is where
Yes.
things happen.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unless you're in a haunted house setting,
Right.
you need to go outside, you need to go outside, and you need to lose track of time, and like darkness needs to come. And if you're in a small town like I was, we didn't have street lights. There was, it
Right.
would just fall, and you'd be like, oh shit, I gotta get home. And now the neighborhood that is so familiar to me is now really scary.
And no parental oversight
Right?
because the presumption of safety that I don't know where that comes from, but the cliche of like, we were out until the dinner bell rang or whatever it is. Um,
It's true though.
it's
Yeah,
true.
it's
It's
true.
totally true. It is like, I mean, I remember even my parents when I was like 13, we went to London and they just told me to give me some money for a tube ticket and they're like, just come back at dinner time in London. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll figure this out.
Yeah.
I would never do that. I never would have done that with my kids
No, me
not
either.
because I didn't trust them, because I would have been too scared.
Right, right. And there was a presumption that we could handle it, and we usually did.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah. We might have lost a few along the way, but
Yeah.
that happens. So just kind of going back to the idea that you did something different, which I think any author listening to this has such a deep appreciation for, and yet it tends to, and I'm speaking from experience, I know it tends to scare longtime agents, longtime editors who are just like, can't we just keep doing what we're doing? It's working well.
Yeah.
Um, there's also the expectation then, like, okay, well, if you're going to do this, it's also difficult from a marketing standpoint just to do a one-off. I just happen to do this, and some people
Right.
get away with it, like John Grisham. But so was there conversations where like, this should be 3 or 4 books? So you establish yourself in a couple different lanes.
Well, so I did a 2-book contract with HarperCollins, and the next book will be another standalone. It won't have anything to do with the 80s or Mrs. Smith. It is going to be a contemporary in some of the sections, and then throwback to like the late 90s in other sections. So
Yeah.
it's like basically a college reunion type, and it takes place on Long Island again. And it's more witchy demon possession kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there are phones, but not in all of it, which is great because I can use it just to the extent where like the women who are I'm in this whole like women turning on each other exploration mode right now. So they can say nasty little barbs in texts,
Yeah.
and that's
Right.
mostly what I'm using
And
it
they really have to
for.
work at it because those are the actual buttons.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta mind them.
The QWERTY keys. Yeah.
Right. And so the question is like what will happen after that? Because I do have more ideas. I think the challenge in marketing me, and I feel for the publicists is what are these books? What are we calling them? Are we calling them horror? Are we calling them cozy horror? Because the next one doesn't really have the same vibes as this one, so it's much darker.
But what's interesting, I'm on the Amazon page right now for Invasive Species, and it's listed as contemporary women's fiction, which
Oh yeah, but they always get everything wrong on
I know I was
Amazon.
about to say, like that
Yeah.
feels not necessarily true. I mean, like even women's fiction as a label is pretty lame. Like what does that
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. I don't think any women's fiction author would look at this book and be like, yeah, she's one of us. They'd be like, no, no, she's not.
But when
Yeah.
when it says like for fans of Grady Hendrix, I'm like that feels like a great
Comp.
that great comp, right?
Yeah.
Because and it's funny, I even kind of noticed like the book cover with your name, the font of your name feels kind of Grady Hendrix to me in terms of the font. And I'm like, that's a great comp because obviously a very popular writer and who has wildly imaginative stories that don't go crazy dark, but give you enough. So yeah, so that's perfect.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's tough because I just got back from a very, very long and exhaustive tour. And I love talking to indie booksellers about placement
Yeah.
and, just kind of like what they're seeing. And they said, well, it's interesting because we're shelving this in horror, but we know so and so at so and so store is shelving it as new fiction. So, and then somebody else has it as fantasy. So
Huh.
they said it's tough. These genre blends often will fall through the cracks because people don't know where to shelve it. And then when people go in to find it, they don't know where to find it or they don't know what they're looking at if it's in like general fiction. So it's tricky. It's tricky when you blend stuff. So next time, the next book is going to be like much more along the just horror lines.
Right, right. So you were never discouraged from your publisher of like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this.
Oh, my mystery publisher, the discussion about this novel took about 5 minutes. She's actually since retired, my editor. She was a senior editor at Kensington, and she does not like dark anything. When I told her I was working on this, she was like, that doesn't sound like it's for me, but I hope it goes well for you. And I knew it wasn't. And, I have to give her right of first
Right,
refusal. That
right.
took
She
two
had the
seconds.
option. Yeah.
Right. So she was like, good luck with it. It's not for me. Gave me nightmares from like the first two paragraphs.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
Which is not that scary. It's not that scary. But
Yeah.
so then we put it out in the world and we ended up at HarperCollins. So now I have two different publishers. And the tricky thing about that is they don't care what the other ones are doing. They've got their deadlines for you and their expectations for you. And if those two things happen to cross over, you got to try to negotiate a few weeks of like, just hold on 1 second. I'm
Yeah.
editing this book.
But and that's, kind of on the surface that almost feels a little myopic in the sense of like, publishers are investing traditionally more than a story right? They want to see you, they want to develop you as a career author because it only helps them. So if part of your career is with somebody else, they can't be necessarily completely agnostic about it because it matters. If you went off and published something really different. Like if you went hardcore erotica under your name with a different publisher, you would think, okay, that's a consideration for us and how we market you because you have the same name. But it sounds like there's not any kind of talk between them at all.
No, not at all. And that's where like a good agent comes in. And thankfully I have the best. So she makes sure that I have enough time to write what I need to write. And then also, to go out on the road and promote. I don't know how other authors do it, but I can't work on the road. I'm too tired. I'm too
It's
burnt out.
hard.
I'm an
It's hard.
introvert, and after like every event, I'm like, I cannot even speak to anybody for like
Right.
12 hours.
Right. I know. I know. We always have, even on vacation, we always have the best laid plans for productivity and just not being in the setting you're accustomed to. And I usually only write an hour a day, so I can squeeze it in. but so people who are like, yeah, I'm writing on the airplane. I'm like, that sucks. I hate doing stuff
Yeah, I
like
can't
that.
stand it. Oh, and I always feel like it's not as good. Whatever I write when I'm trying to force it, I'm just like, I don't have my coffee that I like. I'm not in the
Right.
chair that I like, you
I
know.
mean, that is it is important. I think when you're starting out, you should and will have to write from anywhere. If you're in, your car during your kid's soccer practice, whatever, because you need to establish the rhythm and the
Right,
routine and the
right.
muscle. But after a while, you're like, I've I've got my routines. So,
Yeah.
um, and I'm also curious, just with your just how much you've put out over the years. You're obviously way more than a book a year person in terms of
It depends.
productivity.
Like I at one point I was doing three a year and
Oh
that
my
was
God.
terrible. It was really terrible, especially since my kids were fairly young. I still had to like bring that my son is dyslexic and he went to a special school, so I had to drive him there and pick him up every day. And then there were like the regular kids' activities, and those all fell on my head because my husband didn't get home from work until really late. So trying to write three books in one year was insane. And at one point, my daughter said to me, like, you're always looking at your computer. And I
Right.
thought, oh my God, I'm missing them. So I
Right.
dropped a series actually because I felt like I needed to be more present.
Right.
And then I was like, ooh, two books a year is, as I got older, I was like, this is still really tough. I'm not, I feel like my brain is not spinning as fast
And
as
like,
it
how
used
long are
to.
your books, would you say, normal word count, like average word count?
Oh, 80.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So full size books, obviously. Um,
Yeah.
and, and
Um,
and when you're doing two a year, is that concurrent or like one every 6 months?
so I'm trying to get, for a while, I was in one every 9 months, and that was
Yeah,
comfortable. I like that. That gave
yeah,
me some time to do other things in life. When I signed with HarperCollins, unfortunately, that put me back in the, almost one every 6 months. But I'm done writing the second one for them, and I'm hoping they want more because I have like two or three more horror ideas, and I would like to keep trying.
yeah.
But I would like to get like every other year mystery, every other year horror,
Yeah.
because it's just, you know. I want more time with each book so it can be the best thing it can be. Like
Well, that's the other thing
sometimes
too,
like we
right?
need to like walk away for 3 months and then
Right.
come back and read it and be like, okay, I
Right.
get where I was going with that, but I can make this better. I want the time to be able to like let it sit and percolate for a little bit.
And that's the struggle is we often don't get that time. And I know
Yeah.
you can extend deadlines and that kind of thing. And I think what people also don't appreciate is that yes, I can write a book in 9 months and have it, several passes on it. Um, but usually in the middle of that, I'm getting edits for my last book.
Yeah.
That could be
And
2 or 3 months.
promotion. You got to
And
do promotion
promotion,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time working on two things at once because I get the stories conflated and I just, I get the tone mixed up and so I then will have to stop working and there's literally 2 or 3 months to make edits, like really substantial edits a lot of times. So yeah, right. And then promotion and all that kind of thing. It's you're not in a vacuum ever, 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 ever.
Exactly. So I feel like if we all had a year per book, they would just be better books,
Yeah,
which
why?
is kind of the goal.
Yeah, I know. I mean I'm pretty for it. I'm a year a book is usually what I'm asked to do. So it works fine for me. I think if I were slower than that, that would make me feel like I was almost missing out, that I needed to, you
Oh
know.
yeah, I'd feel like that 100%. I'd be like, I gotta crank this up. If I don't get one out per year, I'm gonna lose my audience, blah, blah, blah. But readers are, I don't think a lot of publishers don't give them enough credit. Like an author can disappear for 2 years, or, like take Catherine Stockett. Yes, she did write The Help, but it's been like 14 years or something between books. It's not going to stop everybody from buying her new book. Some people haven't
Yeah,
even never even heard of her, but
yeah,
she's still going to do just fine. Like if a writer is not around for 2 years, they're not totally gone. But I think there's this terrible pressure. Like if you're not on social media, if you're not producing work constantly, that you're just going to fade into the ether. And And I think that readers are more connected to us than that.
I think that's true. I mean, it'll be interesting. My next book coming out in November, it will be 22 months from my last one. And my last one was kind of my breakout. So I'm like, I need, yeah, I had this feeling of like it should be soon,
Yeah.
and I was still doing a book a year, but you can't control publisher schedules and how much volume they have per season and things like that. But now that we're getting closer to it, I see like, yeah, people didn't forget. People who like my books aren't going to forget it.
Right, right,
So I think how long we had to wait between seasons of The Sopranos. It could be
right.
like 16 months. I'm like, oh, I remember
Right. It's
exactly
not like
what
we
Tony
forgot who
Soprano was
Tony
like.
was in that
Right,
time.
right, exactly. Well, Ellery, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our little storytelling. So I've got this is the making up portion of the show. I've got three books that I've picked at random from my bookshelf. We're going to choose one book. We're going to choose a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and that'll be the first sentence in like a 2 minute long short story. We'll just
Oh
alternate
Lord, okay.
sentences.
I'm not
And
good
when
at
it goes
these things.
completely off the rails, I'll call it. And we'll see how dark we get. It usually gets pretty dark, so we'll see.
Okay.
Well, but no pressure. It could be about whatever we want it to be. I've got R.H. Herron's Stolen Things.
Great cover.
My friend Wendy Walker's What Remains.
Awesome.
And I've never even pulled this one off the shelf before, but I've got the Da Vinci Code.
Oh, okay.
So
We could be
I
going to
went to
Italy.
I actually stood on my chest to get to there's a shelf even above what you can see.
Oh,
So
really?
I
Okay.
just pulled three from there. So choose one of those.
Um, I'm gonna go for the first one. I really liked
Okay.
that cover.
Stolen Things. So give me a page number between 1 and 350.
I'm gonna go for my lucky number, which is 27.
Okay. I'm going to quickly scan page 27 and see. All right. You do whatever you want to do with this.
Okay. Oh boy.
And mom was never dumb. She wouldn't let it go.
She kept bringing up the story of finding the old woman in the backyard.
For years and years and years, we knew none of it was true, probably because we also knew mom loved to drink. But it wasn't until in my 30s when I returned home for Thanksgiving that something made me realize there was some truth to the story after all.
I think even though she put down her glass of Crown Royal and it was her third one of the night and she was in tale-telling mode, I could just sense there was some truth in the air. And it was the way she described that old woman's hand. I couldn't get the picture out of my head.
But she read the doubt on my brother's face. And maybe it was the alcohol, and maybe it was just decades of being dismissed that made her finally scream out, "If you don't believe me, grab a shovel and I'll tell you where to dig."
I thought she was full of shit, frankly, but my brother looked at me and said, I dare you. And even though we were too old for that, it still works. And so I said, fine, you hold the flashlight. Let's go. And we went to the garage and we grabbed the shovel. And mom came trudging behind, but her demeanor had totally changed. The challenge in her voice had turned to fear.
It was just as we stepped into the backyard that a soft sprinkling of rain began, which felt just perfect for the mood. And she took us into the far back corner of our 3 acre estate, a place covered with autumn leaves and the smell of peat. And she trudged around in the wet, stuck her foot next to an old tree stump, and said, "Right here, the ground should be soft."
I noticed right away that there was a strange scattering of mushrooms, only in that part of the ground. They weren't anywhere else. Our dog had followed us. His name was Leighton. And Leighton whined as I held up the shovel and approached the area where mom told us to dig. And for a moment, I thought, this is a mistake. what am I doing out here? Why am I out here? It was cold. A little tendril of sharp wind crept down the collar of my shirt. It seemed to go deep through my skin, between the vertebrae of my spine, whispering, mistake, mistake. But I dug the blade of the shovel into the ground anyway.
I think we call it there. That was
Okay,
great. That was
that was
great.
fun.
You were fantastic. You just ran with it.
I want to know what this woman looks like now.
Well,
Yeah,
and I'll tell you,
cool.
it's funny. I listened to that entire story, and the detail that really makes that story are the mushrooms, right? Like that the power of that imagery of a mushroom, which has so many different meanings to it, holds so much weight. And those are the things that really make stories good. I think where you're like, well, what's the deal with the mushrooms?
Right, right.
That was fun. Well, what a pleasure to meet you and talk to you and hear about your
You
books
too.
and your
This was
writing
great.
career.
This was just like hanging out with a friend over coffee.
That is the intention of this
Yeah, you did
podcast.
it. Nailed. Nailed it.
Awesome. Well, again, what a pleasure talking to you, Ellery, and I hope to meet you in person sometime.
Same here. And I can't wait to read your next book.
Oh, thank you. All right, take care.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, that is it. That is my conversation with Ellery Adams. That was a great one, and it was a fantastic storytelling. I kind of think she knocked it out of the park. I think she was really prepared for it. She knew what she was doing. She was really good at it. If you want to check out Ellery or everything about all of her 40 plus books, you can just head to her website, which is elleryadamsbooks.com. And if you're interested in learning about my books, pre-ordering my next book called When They Find Me, which releases in November, head on over to carterwilson.com. And if you're interested in that Parisian suspense writing retreat next year or any one-on-one private coaching, you can go to unboundwriter.com. All right, friends, that is it. That is it for this episode of Making It Up. Another one out just next week. As always, I love the fact that you listen to this. I appreciate it. Feel free to email me at any time with any suggestions or guests that you might be interested in on. You can just email me at carterwilson.com. Until next week, take care.